You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Welcome to our slightly delayed reaction crew. This is our chat and our thoughts about Skeleton Crew's episode 7, which is entitled, We're Going to Be in So Much Trouble. If you haven't seen the episode, what are you doing listening to this? Go and watch the episode. But if you're feeling brave, and actually if you don't really care and you just want to listen to the sound of my lovely voice and Mr. Newbold's rather raspy voice, then carry on. Now, you may remember that in the previous episode, episode 6, entitled Zero Friends Again, it was kind of a mixed bag of events. We had the parting of ways between KB and Fern and Neil and Win, one scale a mountain, and we'll go and visit a load of junkyard crabs, to be reunited in the ship, to be thrown into peril with the thought of imminent death and destruction at the grip of a garbage compactor. However, they escaped and they managed to fly away from Lanupa and head towards Atatin. The coordinates were stored by KB, which is very handy. On the other side of things, Jod managed to convince enough of the pirate crew to keep him alive and give him one last chance with a promise of untold riches and spoils at the planet Atatin. Everybody's now just about to find out what the hell Atatin's all about.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Joining me this week, as aforementioned, Mr. Newbold, who is a little bit raspy and a little bit hoarse. What did you think of this week's episode, dude?
I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, not that every episode of Skeleton Crew hasn't been brilliant so far. This one was particularly interesting. I mean, it opens differently. It opens with the parents on Atatin in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
You know, seeing the kids in the peril that they're in. It got real, this episode. This was the one that made you realise that there's no face turn for Jod. He's not playing two duplicate roles. He was always the snake that Kim said he was, and pretty much everybody else has said he was. And I kind of like it for that. There's no apologies for the fact that this guy is a big steaming pile of bantha pudding.
Well, absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean, you can put it more succinctly. And also, I couldn't be even more wrong, because I think I was saying I reckon he might turn at the end and save the kids. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. This was basically his episode of really solidifying, his position in the galaxy. And hopefully, anyway, anybody who liked a character might be less in love with a character now, because yeah, he was pretty cruel to those kids, and I wasn't too happy when he almost made old Neil cry a little bit. That was quite mean.
It was mean. He proper turned on him and gave him a right telling off.
I mean, exactly. I mean, the only saving grace was actually he said, "I'm not just talking about Neil." He didn't just single Neil out. It was all out. It's just like, all of you, just shut up. But to be fair, I have been round friends' houses where after even like a couple of hours, you're just like, oh my God, just shut the frack up. Will you please be quiet and just go away?
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. He's done well to last as long as he has. And we don't know how long this has all taken in real time. You got to imagine it's a couple of weeks. I would say it feels like a couple of weeks.
I'd say probably at the most a couple of weeks. Yeah, definitely.
And so he's kept this whole thing rolling and kept them on the hook just enough. I mean, the one thing I noticed, there was a lot of stares between Fern and Jod. When he had the knife against her throat, yield, and she yields, and then he kind of gets her back on side, and then she's the idea guy, if you like, for the team, even though they're all bringing their own to it, but she's like the face of it. Yeah, she's like facing the A-team in that sense. She's kind of that character, if you want to equate them in any way to those characters. Obviously, Neil is Mr. T. When you sort of see them all in that predicament, when they're sat in the cockpit of the Onyx Cinder, and he's got the lightsaber, and SM-33's down and out, he'll come back. They chopped IG-11 into bits.
I mean, how many times has like C-3PO been blasted into smithereens?
Exactly that. And thankfully he didn't step on the little bug. He kicked him out of the way. So to quote Leia, we've got everything we need. There's enough still there for them to pull it around in the final episode. But it was a fantastic ending. I know we're skipping all over it, but when they're in the vault,
skipping right to the end,
just massively. When they're in that vault at the end,
yeah,
and he just walks towards them with the saber. It's all the kids reunited with the parents, which was a lovely scene. But just to go back to the beginning, the kickoff was just so very E.T. Just the transmitter in the forest. It just had
massive. It's that whole kind of silhouette thing, isn't it? It's like the whole thing with ET, like you could say, like the baddies and the government. You only see them through like the searchlights and the torches and stuff. And it's kind of the same with these kind of like security droids. It was quite neat how they did that whole relay race, as it were. Everybody knows they're probably going to get stunned, so let's see how far we can try and make it away before we get stunned and stuff. And yeah, so and also I think it's showing the parents they're being proactive. But then, these aren't the parents who are going to suddenly just rally up completely against like the status quo and the government. We're not going to take up arms or anything. They're going to try and do as best as they can to get their kids back. But they kind of realise that, they don't have the resources and the ability to do anything more than what they're doing.
Wim's dad makes a good point that stuck out to me was when they all have that hologram scene. Yeah. The pirates are being a bit snippy and just, it doesn't mean anything to them. But we know what it means to the parents and to the kids. So it's quite a weighty scene, I think. But when Wim's dad, when Wendell says, this is the sort of thing you would have learned about when you graduated. So that's when you realise that the occupants and the people of At-Atin, once they get to a certain age or a certain education, I guess, in those terms, are told, yes, this is what At-Atin, this is what At-Atin is. This is where we're standing in galactic society. And even though they probably, even the parents, I would imagine, don't know what's gone on beyond the barrier, that their place within the barrier is very special. Yeah. And so the kids would have learnt it and they've had this adventure. But I think, like you say, that the parents can only take it so far, but they take it as far as they can take it within the boundaries of what they can do.
And also then it's really it's down to the kids, isn't it, to get home. But it's a whole thing like, the message, it's reinforced the whole fact that they are so out of touch with the galaxy because they're like, oh, find a Republic emissary, not a new Republic emissary, but like a Republic emissary. So it's like, you could imagine the conversation of like, this is what this planet is and this is what we do. And you can't escape or you can't leave. And the reason why you can't leave is because it's so important that we maintain the security and integrity of the planet. It's a sacrifice that they're all having to make, but I suppose it's one that isn't necessarily by choice per se. It's that whole kind of issue around duty. As we see, when the Onyx Cinder lands, there's just people just out on that landing patch. So it hasn't been used in years. Let's think probably the last time it would have been used would be, say, like maybe pre-Order 66. So it's had time for the grass to grow and stuff. But it always amazes me how well-maintained Star Wars mechanical infrastructure is, that actually after 25, 30 years, the thing just kind of kicks into action and just kind of like the pad like launches itself and grabs a ship. Because you think, if it was over here, if it hadn't been used for 10 weeks, it'd be all rusty and you'd have to remake it.
Hello, my name is Aidan Cook and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
I love the fact that the Onyx Cinder was the key to get through the barrier. Yes. And that it is a ship of the Mint.
Yeah, exactly.
That it makes that's all part of the same sort of operation. But when they go down, and the visuals for that were fantastic, when they go down, when Judd walks across the barrier, the gates open, he walks in and finds out this is just one of 1,139.
It was 1139.
Yeah, which was kind of cool. When he goes to touch the first coin and they all start tumbling away, I wonder whether or not that's the magnets that he uses to use the Force, because most of the things that he pulls towards him are metallic. Yeah. So are they magnets, directional magnets? And just the fact that he touches the one and it's just, is he pulling them all using the Force? But the thought that was one of that many of these vaults, but also when you look in the distance, there's runners going across with huge giant arms moving the money around. And you think, well, those Republic credits can't be leaving At-Atin. There's nowhere for them to go. So what's the process of them moving around? Is it a continual stock check? They talk about the great work early on. So I'd love to know what the process is that's kept these generations of people going for all these years.
Well, and that's just it. You almost wonder if maybe they just go, we'll recycle them and we'll just mint some more or something. Or I'm guessing the material for those coins and stuff are coming from the planet. So it's like, again, it's like, how much of a finite resource does the planet have?
But it's like when you look at Star Wars coins, when you look at a calamari flan or a Republic credit or an Imperial credit or any of them, Mando coins, they don't have a king's head or a queen's head or a monarch's head on them. So we can date our coins by Queen Elizabeth, King Charles, whatever it might be. In the Star Wars galaxy, they don't seem to stamp their money quite like that.
You kind of then do think, has the population kind of been slightly manipulated by the supervisors home? Okay, so maybe somebody of like Wendell's age would remember when the last ship may have been. It might have been a kid or something, but they've stopped for a while. So surely at that point, you're like, what's going on? But we haven't had any ships or any embassies. That's assuming that it was a regular thing. It almost sounds like it could have been quite a prestigious thing for them to get ships through. It might not necessarily be like they do it on a regular basis.
And also, I think the people on the planet think that like the kids did, like we did until we saw them return to Atatin, that big green bilious smoke was the planet. And it's not until you get into the cloud you realise that Atatin sits right at the centre of this enormous circular cloud. So if you arrived at the planet and you scan it and it's gas and it's difficult to judge how big the planet is, you just take one look and go, no, not worth it. But actually, we learn that you get beyond that. So, and it's obviously holography. It's a massive hologram kept in place. It's that sort of thing. And with those relays, and it's all being kept in place by something, tractor beams or whatever.
It's probably those relays that are doing it. They probably must be keeping it like under control or something.
Yeah. I mean, we've still got a little bit to go in the whole Republic, haven't we?
Yeah.
And because they mentioned the great work, and you do kind of think maybe this was one of the things that was set in place. Well, it is set in place during that era. Maybe we'll learn more about the instigation of that in the whole Republic.
I mean, are we assuming that every single of those Akrin or whatever, are they all mint planets? And is that what we're assuming? Or are we assuming that maybe they are all slightly different?
They say there's these 9 jewels of the galaxy, and it feels like they've all got slightly different strengths. But that's just a supposition. I don't know if it was part of the great work. But now that this has been discovered, and we don't know where it's going to go by the time we get to episode 8, I just wonder, where will those funds be turned to? Because it's immense, it's insane, ridiculous wealth. If that was in the hands of the Republic, the New Republic, think of the things they could do, the rebuilds they could do. They could put the galaxy right to a massive degree. If that ends up in the hands of the Imperial Remnant or the First Order, you could build a Starkiller base with that. So it just feels like it's a plot thread that's going to play forward.
Yeah, well, this is it. Or even it's that suddenly it's that financial justification for not only Starkiller base, but also all those thousands of Star Destroyers with planet killers lasers on them.
The Sith Eternal and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, because it could just be an interesting route through.
We don't know yet, I don't believe, where Atatin is in the galaxy.
No.
I just have a weird, I'm just going to say it because it will probably come to nothing, but I'm going to say it. How difficult was it to get to Exegol? It was very difficult. It was way out. It was hard to get to. You needed a wayfinder. This feels like a place like that. I just wonder whether Exegol lived under other names. Was Exegol an at somewhere at one point? Because it's a nightmare to get to. You've got to know your way. Atatin's the same. There's clearly other places in the galaxy like that. I don't know. It's just a supposition, but there's a similarity there.
Exactly. There's definitely something that's connecting the two on some level, or, as you said, a similarity. It just shows how easy it is. I mean, if you can lose a whole planet, which is the second planet that we've lost in the galaxy, how easy is it to find them? But also, or what else is hidden out there that's been wiped off the records for whatever reason, for either security or because the Empire doesn't want people to stumble across, maybe like Exegol.
You've got to wonder how many worlds are hidden for that reason. And at Atin, we've now found it. The pirates have found it. It's the pirate era. Very cleverly, the Mandalorian timeline is setting up that bounty hunters and, in that power vacuum created after the Empire has pretty much dissipated to the organised degree that it was, and that the New Republic seem to want to just put their arms down. That's obviously not going to end well for them. And so there's this place for organisations like this to prosper. What happens to Atatin? We're saying that. We haven't seen episode 8. There's only Jod on the planet at the moment. He's there with a lightsaber, just pitching forward slightly into what we might see in episode 8. If they've been in this dust cloud, this maelstrom hidden away from the galaxy for so long, and if this is a High Republic era planet, if you think of it as a High Republic era planet, which is weird to consider when we've just had the Acolyte, which was a High Republic era show, and this feels like it's connected to that as well to many degrees. Why wouldn't there be a Jedi outpost on there? Why wouldn't we have the sons of, daughters of, whatever Jedi were there when this first began?
For everything in one location, Daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
I don't see the supervisor doing it. That 50-foot tall Stephen Fry comes stomping in and kicks his ass. I think it'd be really cool. But I don't know if that'll happen. And again, his supervisor, it was great to hear his voice because he's so distinctive. And wow, Stephen Fry is now part of the galaxy far, far away. It's very cool.
That is cool, yeah.
And I hope we see him. I really do hope we see him. I just want to see what he does and how this plays out. I don't know.
Yeah.
This show's turned us around so many times. I don't really want to say that we can figure it out yet.
I mean, it was left on a cliffhanger this week's episode, almost quite literally, but it could go a number of ways because actually now, if you notice, Jod's now like really he's a captain of everything. Brutus is gone. He's dispatched of him quite brutally, but you see kind of like Vane kind of stepping up, and so you just wonder actually if they just write Jod off, he's not coming back, and then he flies off. And that's how kind of we get Vane in The Mandalorian.
Gorian Shard, Vane was part of his gang before he was part of this gang, presumably, and he can't be part of two gangs at once. He can't be captain of two ships at once, as SM33 says. Gorian Shard was basically a giant slice of cabbage, wasn't he? There's no reason why Gorian Shard just couldn't grow again, like Groot. So I don't see any reason why he can come back.
Yeah.
It's the time of the season to make these pitches, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We're not going to have a chance after next week.
No, exactly, because it's all going to be out there. Have you got any wild speculations you want to jump out and chuck out for next week's episode?
I just have a sneaky feeling that there's going to be some sort of Jedi-related involvement. I don't think that Jod is just going to get away and run roughshod. He can't do it on his own. I don't see how we can bring the pirate ship to him. If they've had a process that's kept them hidden and safe for so long that they would just abandon it on the word of a stranger who says he's an emissary. He's done well to get as far as he has, but I think he's only encountered droids pretty much so far.
Exactly.
But now I think he might sort of reach the limits of his charm in that sense. But if the world, I just keep coming back to this thought, if the world has been hidden away for as long as it has, that there is a decent chance that there is some sort of Jedi outpost on that world. We just had last year Living Force, John Jackson Miller's book, which I really do want to read again. I loved it. And in that, it's all about the disassembly and taking down and closing, basically, of a Jedi outpost. So that era was when the sort of the shrinking back to Coruscant was sort of happening. And this is, it's not a good 140 years before this, 100 years before Phantom Menace, so even longer, really. It might just sit in that time frame to still have Jedi there, and it will be the ancestors of. So I don't know. I've kind of repeated myself there, but I think that might be something that could happen.
You kind of feel like there's got to be some kind of like poetic justice to Jod, really. You kind of feel like there's got to be something he's going to be hoisted by his own petard or something like that.
Can you remember in the first episode when they opened up the cargo hold and there was one credit?
Yeah.
Do you remember if it was a regular credit or a Republic credit? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Can't remember. Not off the top of my head.
We'll have to go and have a look back before episode 8 because I've got a sneaky feeling that was a Republic credit. And so there's a connection there. The ship that they take at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Was that a connection to where we're going in the final episode?
Yeah.
So it might be worth reinvestigating that.
That's worth a quick 5-minute watch before Wednesday. Yeah, I have no wild speculations with this one. That's only because it was only pointed out to me this week that SM33 is Smee from Peter Pan. Oh yeah, of course it is. Makes sense now. I like all the pirate code. Love all that stuff. It's very Pirates of the Caribbean, like where you don't really have rules. You kind of have guidelines and stuff, but it keeps it kind of accessible to the kid or the child logic because of that. So you can literally just go, claimsies. And then
unclaimsies. Claims, yeah. Exactly. I love that. That punch. That was right turn Clyde, wasn't it? That was just perfect.
Hi, this is Brian Hickey, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Probably the first week I've actually seen any kind of real criticism about the show actually online. It's kind of started to just kind of like surface a little bit. And it's nothing like major, but I have seen a few people, so I'll get your take on it before we head off, about, I guess, the last couple of episodes and the pacing. It feels like the pacing, the show's kind of slowed down a little bit. From episode 3 or 4, things have kind of slowed down a bit. So I don't know what your take is on that.
Last week's episode definitely took it down a little bit because it felt like it was focusing more on the characters. There was that fractious element to it, and it gave us a chance to learn a bit more about KB. So I appreciated that. I didn't mind that at all because it was ground-based as well. So they're not going to be moving around as quickly in that sense. And this one felt more about betrayal. I mean, not that we didn't think he was going to betray them, but it was an absolute stab through the heart in places, killing SM33 and just being an absolute arse to those kids. And I agree with you. Sometimes kids do need to, dial it back a bit. That's why kids don't have coffee, as they say in Encanto. Oh, there's moments like that. And I think also it's smart because we've just eased back into fourth gear rather than fifth for the last couple of episodes. My head tells me when we get to episode 8, whilst we're going to get a resolution, we're on at it now. I'm really pleased we're actually on at it. Yeah. It's not like Voyager when we get home and in the last 10 seconds of the show, we're on at for the finale. I think it's really going to cook. So I think the pacing has actually worked to its advantage, which is, I know, we all know from last summer, one of the criticisms of The Acolyte was that the pacing was a bit choppy and it didn't work to its advantage. I feel that the pacing of this, when we get to the end episode, I think we'll look back at the season and go, actually, that was a nice little lull before the final run.
You do need that. You need a little bit of dynamic pacing just to kind of stretch things out and also allow things to breathe and to develop and the characters to develop. Otherwise, it's a little bit one note and it is just like run and gun. And that's great. But also, I think because of the type of characters we're following, like there's a level of believability that you can just about get away with. And if they've pushed the envelope on that a few times, I mean, obviously it's Star Wars, so, what is believability really? But in the grand scheme of things, these are still kids, inexperienced kids. So, like, how much can you really chuck them through, like, the ringer in the same way?
We've not, thankfully, had a moment like we had in Kenobi when little 9-year-old Leia is outrunning 3, guys who are trying to catch her. That, as lovely and fantastic as Vivian is, that seems ridiculous. It just made them look stupid. There's never been a moment in this where the bad guys have looked stupid. But the kids have always just looked like kids. You know what they can do. It's been really well played.
I think actually that's one thing, and it's something that we'll touch on in our wrap up episode. But I do think there's been some lessons learned from Kenobi series, like what kids can get away with. And because even actually it isn't just that, it was even like at the end with Luke, which actually I found even more unbelievable. So anything else to share before we head off, Mr. Newbold?
No, other than apologies to all the listeners. This should have come out last week. I've had a chest infection and a stupid cough. You could probably tell from my voice. So apologies to you, Mark, because I've messed you around all week. I'm glad we finally got this recorded. I'm very, very much looking forward to the last episode, though. I really am. It's been a brilliant season and a brilliant show. And I love these characters. I love this show. I think everyone's done a bang-up job, and I want to see more. So whatever the fate of the ratings, I'm not in it for the ratings. I just want to see more Skeleton Crew. And I'm really looking forward to next week.
Episode 8 comes out in a couple of days' time, so we will be back with our voices strong and loud and proud. The final episode of Reaction Crew, we'll do a wrap-up, so the penultimate. So until then, thank you very much for listening. Mr. Newbold, get ready to hit play on your pre-recorded end message. But like I said, as always, if you want to send in some thoughts about the show, then by all means do. If you've got any listeners' questions about anything to do with Legends, Old Republic, New Republic, anything you want our take on, just send us a listener's question and Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can do it.
I certainly can, and this is how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's my wonderfully pre-recorded voice ended for this episode.
Brilliant. There you go. Nice one, dude. Well, look after yourself. Drink lots of honey and lemon and try not to cough too much. And everybody else, enjoy the finale of Skeleton Crew, and hopefully you'll join us later this week. So until then, stay safe, take care, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.